We'll see most of you back here at 12:30 for our annual meeting. I did some education at Bible study on Thursday, but I think I'll try it again here, give you a little preview. There are two kinds of nonprofit organizations. Did you know this? There's member-owned and board-owned. And your congregation is a member-owned nonprofit, which means that we must have requirements for members. We have to keep attendance. So those of you who hate it when you pass the book down, why are they keeping track of it? That's the law. Then not all churches are member-owned. There are board-owned churches, like for instance New Life. A lot of the evangelical churches, there's a board that they have the control of the church. So the average person that goes there, they're not like they attend, they're in a small group or something, but they're not like an official member. But your congregation, you are a member. Most of the churches are that way, I'm pretty sure. And so we have a meeting once a year where we elect officers who do your work for you. In between the annual meetings, you approve how the allocation of funds are distributed, how the gifts and offerings are distributed in this congregation with the council's recommendation. And and then we'll hear about the Break the Barrier thing and the Connect More to Christ. So I'm excited about the meeting today. I hope you'll be able to come back. All right, I'm even, if we're possible, more excited to keep going in the Reformation here. And I'm so thankful that you are too. Let's pray. Gracious and loving God, let this time be helpful and fruitful as we read some more of Luther and look at this history and ponder its importance for us today. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so last week, real quick, we did the Diet of Augsburg, perhaps the most telling moment in the Reformation, which is a big thing when you think about the posting of the 95 Theses or Luther's Inquisition at Worms, where he said, I will not compromise, here I stand, God help me, etc. He made his stand. But when you think about it, when it comes to the Lutheran Reformation, the presentation of the Augsburg Confession, written by Philip Melanchthon and others who were in collaboration, and then Luther from a distance, is become the statement for what it is to be Lutheran for 500 years. Now, there's debate amongst Lutherans about how you should understand that document. And, there's a lively debate going on about that fact. But nonetheless, that has been the kind of bottom line. And later on, Philip Melanchthon will write an apology. We'll get into that in a minute. For that apology, not as in, I'm sorry I wrote it, but a defense of the Augsburg Confession. And it's the core document in our Book of Concord, as we call it, our confessional writings. So, that was last week. What happens after Augsburg is the question. And usually when you watch a movie on the Reformation, it ends at Augsburg. And then, or you get a picture of Luther passing away, and there's like 15 years of history after that. So we're going to spend a little time with that anyway. So, just to finish the review, we talked about the significance of what it means that our church is founded on a confession of faith. This is the way James Nestigan put it. The word confession is more significant than it looks. For as Luther and his company saw it, what makes the church is neither its officers or its people, but the Word of God preached and embodied in the sacraments. The church comes into being when it confesses, when it speaks the Word by which God creates, redeems, and produces faith in those here. And that's what makes the church the church. It's preaching. It's confession. Interesting. Not all Christians look at it that way. All right, so Luther goes home after the Augsburg Confession, and he's in the Coburg Castle, remember? About 60 miles north of Augsburg, and now that that's been done, it's been presented, he gets to go home. What happens after that? Well, kind of interestingly, in the early I forget exactly what year, but it's shortly after this, that Halley's Comet shows up. And of course, what do you think all the reformers do? That's a sign! That's God's approval or disapproval of this, my enemy, So I just thought I'd throw that in there, fun little tidbit. So this is the current picture of the Augustinian monastery where now Martin and Katie would live. That's what he was going home to, this huge building, which was a big monastery, which becomes their home, and they have countless people in there every night, just all kinds of visitors. It becomes this amazing center of hospitality and care. So Luther goes home, and he goes home with his elector, John the Steadfast. And I'll put some pictures up here for you in a minute, because we've got to talk about those electors. But remember, Prince Frederick, the guy that protected Luther initially, has passed away. It was back in 1525-ish, I think, somewhere in there. And then now John the Steadfast is the elector. Now John was Frederick's brother. And now he's the elector of Saxony. So he goes home. Family's well, kids are well, Katie's well, but he is sick. He's got ringing in his ears, fainting spells, dizziness, poor vision, a sore throat, many toothaches. It goes on and on. Luther could use some rest, but he's not going to get it. Because the printers want more material. Remember how we talked about that? What was the cash cow of the printers before Luther? Indulgences. You guys listen, good job. But after Luther messed that whole system up, what's going to keep us in business? Well, Luther did. Because people would just eat up the next thing that he wrote. So the printers want more. So it isn't just, Luther's not just driven by his own drive, but he's got others wanting him to work. Here's the way Nestigan puts it. He said it so well, I just wanted to have you read it. That Bugenhagen, Luther's kind of other right-hand person, between him and Melanchthon, and Bugenhagen was Luther's pastor. And Bugenhagen's going up to Denmark to take the Reformation up to Denmark. And so he's gone, and so now Luther doesn't have his pastor buddy to help him with all the duties at Wittenberg. So this meant preaching 4 times a week, in addition to preparing lectures for twice-a-week classes. Family responsibilities, along with the usual hubbub of the Black Cloister, that's the monastery, their home. Part hospital, part hotel, part dormitory, in addition to everything else. Complicated matters still further. Luther was regularly consulted in matters of marriage law and the like, all the while supporting the continuing development of the Reformation. He also had the printers dogging him, wanting something more to put on the market. It was enough work for 3 or 4 people. Small wonder that he had trouble recovering good health. So I think that's just a good grounding of where Luther's at this stage. At the Augsburg Confession, it was successful in that their confession was presented to the emperor. But it wasn't successful in convincing that emperor that they were Orthodox, that they were not heretics. Even though, like I said last week, the bishop of Augsburg, the Catholic, Roman Catholic bishop, said, this is the Catholic faith. But they didn't succeed in convincing him that they are Orthodox. But it did convince the Emperor Charles that we need a general council of the church. We've got to get this settled, and so we need the Pope to call a council. And actually he does, but it doesn't happen in Luther's lifetime. It actually happens right after Luther dies. And do you know what the name of it is? Have you heard of the Council of Trent? Okay, so that's when that happens. There's no compromise at that point. In fact, the Catholic position is even strengthened. But there was this hope that a general council of the church could get together and they could resolve these issues. I don't think Luther's very optimistic at this stage in his life that was going to happen. So, some very important things develop here. And in your Reformation history and repertoire, you need to know about these things. So, people go home. John the Steadfast goes home, Luther goes home. There were 7 signers of the Augsburg Confession, like colleagues, you could say, or equivalents of the Elector of Saxony, of these various different areas of what we know now as Germany, especially up north into the east, 7 signers of different areas signed the Augsburg Confession. This put them at odds with the Edict of Worms going way back. But you cannot support Luther or any of these positions, or you come under the wrath of the emperor. So that's still hanging over their heads. Well, those 7 signers are not stupid. They know they're very vulnerable now, so they have to get together. And they form what's called the Schmalkaldic League. Because, I guess Schmalkald is an area or a town or whatever. So they form this league to say, we're going to be together. If you're attacked, the emperor's attacking us. We're together. So this Charles is sitting there going, wow, I've got the Turks, I really got to deal with it. Now I've got these folks. I don't want to take these guys on at this point. And so that happens. So the Schmalkaldic League is formed as protection. And there's a lot, we're not going to go into it today, but there's a lot of question now about, can someone take up arms against the emperor? What do you think Luther thought about this? Well, Luther early on said, no, you have to respect the emperor. He's our government. And Luther, remember this distinction of kingdoms? Hey, this is the civil government we have, and we have to abide by that. At this point, though, when things have really come in the odds, they did start talking about, well, we're not going to go on the offense, but we can defend ourselves. Because now the emperor's not just threatening just to do his civil job, he's threatening to put the gospel down. And that's the difference. So as a Christian, I have to respect the government, but when they say you can't preach the gospel anymore, then that's a different thing. So they start to wrestle with this really complex issue about a Christian's relationship to the government at this stage, and can we go on the defense? And the answer is yes. So the emperor's, again, actually, as I'm reading through the Reformation stuff, he's a very astute leader. And so he says, well, I don't want war at this point with the Schmalkaldic League. So they actually meet in Nuremberg, and it's called the Nuremberg Standstill. And basically the emperor says, until we have a general council and we have the official word, which I thought he knew the official word by then, but anyway, until we have this general council, we're going to have a timeout. You know, you put your kid on timeout. So we're going to have a timeout. And they call it, and he says, timeout, I'm not going to invade. So that's the Nuremberg Standstill until the council happens. And like I said, it doesn't actually happen until after Luther passes away, some 10 years after this or so, 10, 12 years. So those important things. The Schmalkaldic League now is formed, and we've got the Nuremberg Standstill. So that's what's going on in the wider situation while Luther's working away in Wittenberg with the Reformation. So, in that time, I read through Martin Brecht's works, and he details kind of painstakingly all the different controversies that Luther got involved in. Because now you don't have the Catholic for these areas that now are Protestant. You don't have the Catholic bishop to just say, well, this is the way it is. So you got all these issues to deal with. A pastor does a fair amount of marital support still today, you know, and which is good. People are struggling. A lot of times the pastor's the first one they come to before they get to a counselor and stuff, which is great. Luther's doing this. But he's also resolving conflicts between pastors and cities. There's a conflict that happens, and I won't go into the details of this Zwickau, where there's a pastor who's really critical of some people on the city council. And the city council and this pastor kind of go at it. And Luther tries to, support the pastor, and then the city council calls him what? They call him, I'll come back to that. There it is. They call him a new pope. So you're the authority now? You see, because now they're independent. We're the city council. And so they start to want to dictate not just civil government, church. Nothing new under the sun. Yes, right. There's a vacuum of power. that our own separation of church and state thing, which really goes to the Establishment Clause, goes back, I believe, to the conflict between the Anglican Church and Baptist preachers. Baptist preachers were going around preaching in Anglican territories and stealing converts. So the Anglicans controlled the civil government, and they started passing laws that you couldn't preach. And Thomas Jefferson he was nothing like a Baptist preacher, but he took sympathy on them. And that's one of the reasons that the Establishment Clause, that the government will not make a law about endorsing a particular church, religion, etc. That's where that kind of stemmed. We've gone a long way from its beginning. But anyway, that's a whole other subject, right? Okay, we're not talking about that one. Okay, so that's important. So Luther's embroiled in all these controversies and trying to problem solve. Melanchthon's work, now he did the Augsburg Confession. What happened from the Catholic side is, remember old Eck, the guy that Luther debated? Well, Eck is there, and Eck writes a confutation of the Augsburg Confession. And it's long, and if the Augsburg Confession is like, today's standards Augsburg Confession is long, this is way longer. And it's actually, even Catholics today would say it wasn't that effective and that great of a, we would say, refutation or confutation of the Augsburg Confession, but it's out there, so now Melanchthon has to write an apology of the Augsburg Confession to fight the confutation. You following all of this? Okay. Anyway, so that happens, and then something really important happens. John the Steadfast passes away in 1532. So now we're going to have another elector. So during Luther's lifetime, there were 3 electors of Saxony. And so John Frederick's son, so if this is John the Constant or Steadfast, because he was a supporter of the Reformation, his son is over there on the left. I found, so this is as an adult. This picture here is of John the Constant at the same time when this picture on the left here was made of his son. It's very rare that a young person will have a portrait made. But I found this actually in a museum in London. And then this picture here is Elector John Frederick when he's an adult. So John the Constant dies. His son over here, who's named after his uncle, Frederick, John, dad and his uncle, John Frederick, now becomes elector. This is a picture of him as an adult when he was ruling. Passionate devotee of the Reformation, almost too much so. Remember how Frederick was this master of just pushing just far enough to not get the emperor mad? Well, John Frederick in his passion will not be as wise. And after Luther dies, Emperor Charles comes in, defeats the Schmalkaldic League, invades Wittenberg, and John Frederick has to go off in exile and the whole business. But of course, once you get an idea going, you can't necessarily keep it down, can you, by military force? So anyway, so that's important for you to know that that's happened. So now I want us to read Luther. As I've talked about in this class, everybody talks about the Reformation and people don't really read Luther. And I'm trying to get you really well read in Luther. So I came across this. I'd never read this writing before. I mean, there's so much, who could even come close? But Luther, during this time period, in 1534, starts writing some commentaries on Psalms. You know, as you've known, he loved the Psalms and he lived the Psalms every day. So he starts writing some commentaries on the Psalms. And Psalm 101 talks about the prince or God's leader. It's almost like the government thing. And so Luther goes political. And I thought, since we just love politics, I thought you might like to know what he has to say to princes in this commentary on Psalm 101. So let's do some reading. So this is Luther from this commentary, and I've got quite a bit for us to work through, so let's work hard and see if this has any application to today. Maybe. Do we have any? Where's Derek Kilmer? We need our congressman here, and we need all of our other leaders and our county supervisors, and we need to get all of our leaders in here so they can listen to what Luther says about what they're supposed to do. But clergy and monk did not realize or consider at all that in these psalms they were praising the very group with their mouth, which they daily treated with utter contempt and practically trampled under their feet. What was going on? The religious leaders thought the secular leaders were the real thing. They're like had they understood these psalms, I really think they would have omitted them and would never have sung them. So he's saying, even though they're singing them, they don't understand what they're singing about. It certainly makes no sense for these holy people to praise and commend the secular authorities publicly in the church. In comparison with their position, they have treated these authorities with contempt, and that for the sole reason that they would have liked to see themselves alone be masters on the earth, and all other leaders become monks. So you can see Luther starts off by saying, if he's saying the religious leaders of his day held the political leaders in contempt, does Luther feel that the temporal political leaders are important? I'd say so. He sees them as doing God's work too. Don't let anyone tell you, because we believe in this two-kingdom distinction, that Lutherans don't believe civil government is important. It's God's work. It's his left hand. It's not his right hand. But it is God at work to make life, more livable and good, and to bless us. So anyway, that's the way he starts. Let's keep going. I'll skip a little bit. At the very start, the psalmist, he gives this advice to the kings and princes, that they should praise and thank God if they have a good organization and pious servants at home or at court. So the court was the elector or the prince's, folks who supported him in the government. It follows then, I didn't press you. It follows then that they should learn to know that this is a special gift of God and not a matter of their own wisdom or ability. So if you've got a great team, you better thank God for it. It's a gift of God. That's the way it goes in the world. Nobody thinks he's too clumsy or inept. If he were in the government, he would really do splendidly. And he is dissatisfied with anything done by others in the government. No application here for us. I could do better if I was in D.C. That's right. I could do better if I was in Olympia. Hey, I got all the answers, but I'm just telling you because you want to hear them. Buy me a couple copies and we'll start. So Luther's saying, I love this because it's like, most people think that if I was there, I'd be better. That's probably. But he's also saying, we'll go on to hear about what he says to the princes about humility. Here you may want to say, should one not do what is right, that reason teaches, that what God enjoins? Of what use are the laws to us? What is reason good for? What are you theologians teaching? Is it all to be in vain? Answer, this is not to condemn or reject law, sound reason, or Holy Scripture, but rather the miserable admixture of the filth of our arrogance. The fact that we do not begin such a plan and proceeding with the fear of God and with a humble, earnest prayer, just as if it were enough to have a right and proper proposal and the intention to convert this plan into action speedily according to one's own ability. To do this is to despise God and to seek glory for yourself as the man who can do it. It is contrary to the first commandment. Therefore, such an admixture changes the best law into the greatest injustice, the finest reason into the greatest You see what he's talking about here? Well, let me tell you. Yeah, let me tell you my interpretation of his interpretation of that. He's saying, government folks get together, you princes, and you got a great plan, and you think, if I just carry it out, it's going to make everything better. And you're forgetting God. And you're also forgetting humility. I think this is profound. I think that our best plan, whether we're a Democrat or a Republican, about how we should fix things, or a libertarian, we need to come at it with some humility. I mean, I know I'm right. I know this will fix everything if we do this. I get scared when I hear that. I'd like to hear, I think this will work. By God's grace, I think this might make a dent. You see the presumption here that Luther is working at and concerned about? That whatever position we have, we think we've got this plan, it's going to fix everything. The world's too broken. We can make things better. He's not saying just forget it, throw up your hands. He is saying come at it with some humility. And from a faith perspective, 500 years ago, I know we've got all this, tension between church and state stuff now, but you'll notice that our Congress and other people often would have prayers. I don't know if they're still doing it. I think they are. To say, this is our best plan, but, God help. God help us. Because, our plans are but folly without God's help. I think about this, let's take it out of the civil world, let's put it into the church. We got the break the barrier idea and connect more to Christ thing. The only thing that's going to make people get more connected to Christ is us on our knees, praying about it, seeking God's wisdom and direction. We can come up with a great plan. I think it is a good strategy. It's a great strategy. But it's our God help. This is our best go, but we're just human beings, so we need your Holy Spirit, and without that we can't do it. So that's what Luther's getting at here. He's saying the admixture, we got these human plans and the arrogance that ours is the right answer. He's like, come on, bring it down. A little more humility. That's what I think he's saying. Okay? Let's keep going. I've got a bunch of stuff here. It is not enough simply to have the very best law and the very finest case and the proposal that is absolutely sound. In fact, the finer your law and the better your case, the less arrogant you should be about it. And the less you should brag about it. But you should fear God all the more as one who enjoys putting the finest law to shame and ruining the best cases. He does this because of your arrogance, because you depend on it and brag about it. Thus you spoil everything and provoke God's wrath against you. For he is the enemy of pride and arrogance, which deprive him of his honor and mitigate. I would think that would be militate against the first commandment. I would think. But anyway, I just copy and paste these, so whatever. Look it up again. But okay, so there it is. It could be a great plan, but if you leave God out and you think you've got it together, it may not happen just because of your own arrogance. So we need to be on our knees a little bit. May this therefore be the first lesson and admonition in this psalm. A prince or lord should learn and know that devout servants, faithful workers, and a good administration are gifts of God. And great gifts. I tell you, we can talk about how we don't like things at a certain time of period, depending on our perspectives politically and all this stuff, but I wake up every day and I thank God I live where I do. That I have a vote. That there's a representative government. That as broken as democracy is, I thank God I can get in my car and drive from there to here, and I have roads. There's traffic signals. There's institutions. There's a library. There's public schools, and there's private schools, and there's parochial schools. And I thank God that there's a grocery store. Yes, we all have to work harder to make all of that work better and to be more just, but we need to, of course, those of you who have traveled,
You don't have to show papers in every county.
Well, right, yeah, that too, yeah. carry water in your head 10 miles. You know, I mean, just to drink. And, you know, I mean, when you think about it, we've got a great calling to extend this blessing to other people, but, man, we have a lot to be thankful for. So Luther says that government, and I know we're all kind of skeptical of authorities and down on some are up, some are down, whatever. But Luther says government is a gift. And he's not talking about democracy, he's talking about the prince, who's the Lord of all the, you know, but he's saying that organization is a gift. Let this be the noblest treasure if he has 1, 2, or 3 faithful men at court or in responsible positions, though that is a large number. And is he also real about government? Yes. And let him thank God for this with the prayer that he may preserve and improve such a treasure for him. So this is his advice to those who lead. I mean, be thankful you've got a few good folks around you. For the world is very wicked, false, and untrue. This is especially so at the court, where everyone, or almost everyone, I love that he says that, where everyone, or almost everyone, seeks not the prince's welfare, but rather how he himself may get warm and fat. Nothing new under the sun. Let the prince fare as God wills. A prince cannot look into anyone's heart, and his administration must remain in the dark, for he has to rule through people whom he does not know, and manage with people whose attitude he cannot perceive. He can't look in their hearts and live. But Christ's kingdom, the right-hand kingdom, is not like that. He knows, Christ knows all hearts, and whoever wants to be unfaithful to him deceives himself, and does not harm his Lord. Rather, the Lord can turn the wickedness of his servants into his own benefit and good. This cannot be done in the secular kingdom where the hearts are concealed. So you can see, notice the difference here. So there you go. Do you have any responses to that? Wayne, can you come on up with the mic? Kelly right here has a comment or question. Yeah, I'd like to hear just a little bit. Right here up in front. Yeah. I'd just like to hear a little bit of your reaction to some of this.
Pastor, do you think that Martin Luther would be in favor of city and local governments and institutions like that of praying before they do the government's work, the people's work?
I think he absolutely would. Absolutely. No question, because that, I mean, not just as a show, but I think Luther would say, look, government's a gift from God, and we need to be humble and seek God's help, because all of our plans without God's help are his folly. So I think he would be very much in favor of that. Now, the difficulty in the question is that Luther did not live in a pluralistic world like we do, where there's all these different religions and people of no religion. Everybody was pretty much a Christian. So he's being critical of these princes and the court who have kind of left God out of their business. So how do we bring that principle today is an important question. I think he would be very glad that we do that we pray. So it's hard to even translate them though because of our different contexts. Good question. I hope that's helpful. Other thoughts, responses. Wayne, we only got one mic, so we're going to put you through your paces. Super. My weekly exercise. Yeah, that's right.
I don't have anything to say. I just wanted to see Wayne.
Thank you.
This isn't a very intellectual comment, but when you, up there where it says, this is especially so at the court where everyone pauses, or almost anyone.
Yes.
My first thought was he's taking someone's own advice. He's coming on so strong. Like, well, everyone.
Yeah.
Well, almost everyone.
Yes. He's coming. Yes, nice.
The other interpretation is he says everyone, and then he sees some court people marching in his head, and he reminds himself, no, not everyone. So
right. And I think, thank you for that comment, Dave, because I want to say, I think certainly our current context is one of very skepticalness about people in authority and people who are leading at that level and serving at that level. And there are certainly plenty of scoundrels and people doing it just to make themselves happy and fat and not really have a servant mind, but there are those who do have that. Whether you agree with their philosophy or not is one thing, but there are people of integrity who are still working in that area, and I think we can't totally, throw in the towel that way. So, yeah, great. Sure.
Well, I was going to say that throughout biblical history and recording, God has placed people, and unlikely people, in very high places.
Yes.
And He has done that since the beginning of time. He does it today.
Yes.
And He uses each person to His good works. So whoever is placed, whether it was in Martin Luther's time or our own time, we are called biblically to pray for each elected official or government, if they're not elected, to do God's will for our benefit.
Yes.
They are there because of us.
Yep.
And because God placed them there, not for any other reason. So, again, politically, whatever your persuasion is, there's always happiness or unhappiness or disgruntlement or whatever. But the bottom line is, as Christians, we're to pray for all of them because guess what? They've got their hand on our wallet.
Yeah. Well, that's true. I was right with you to the very end. Yes, because they're working for our good. Oh, no. But isn't it interesting that even though, that was really helpful. Go ahead, please. I want to hear a few more and then we'll move to another
What
thing.
I liked about Luther is he blames the laity and he also blames the hierarchy.
Yes, right.
So that it's balanced.
Yes,
He's not just blaming one side. He's
absolutely.
asking most people to come together.
Yes.
And I'm reminded of a quote from Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
Imagine what man could do and achieve if he doesn't care who gets the credit.
Nice. That is good. Hey, maybe. Those are good. Other thoughts, other responses to this lovely little dip into the secular, that wouldn't have been a word, Luther, but the temporal realm of government. And it's obviously a big issue today. And I don't think Luther could even imagine being in a democratic system. I think on a certain level he would be just, really? You guys have a say? Joyce, going back to your comment about him talking to both, as much heat as Luther got in the Peasants' War thing, going way back to 1525, if you take all of his writings and don't just pull out the number of harsh statements he made against the peasants, remember, he was totally critical of the princes. He says, this is your fault because you are ruling unjustly. But he also said to the peasants, you can't do this. You can't rise up and have anarchy. You have to respect, and he wanted compromise and he wanted conversation. So I think Luther, if he were to live today, it's, really? You guys have that power? And only 10% of you vote?
Yeah.
What is your problem? I think he might say that. I don't know. But I think he'd be pretty excited about that we have that gift. This whole concept. Of course, he lives before the Enlightenment and all of that stuff. Okay, good. Any other thoughts on this lovely wait over here? And then we'll...
Just a quick one. I
Yeah.
think it's curious that, his ending statement on this particular
Yes.
that the Lord can turn the wickedness of his servant into his own benefit and good. It sounds to me like he's telling the prince, the hierarchy of government,
Yes.
this is something you can't do.
Yeah.
That wickedness, if you will, because you don't know the human heart, is inherent in that hierarchy.
Yeah.
And the prince can't do anything about it because he
Yeah.
can't look into our heart.
Yeah. You have to deal with the fact that you're dealing with broken people.
Exactly, yeah.
And yes, and so when it comes to the church, I think Luther's going to say, look at all these broken, messed up people, but God still gets his work done. He still can turn our bad to his good. So, yeah, beautiful, beautiful. All right. Well, what else is Luther up to during this time? He also goes back to lecturing on the book of Galatians. 1534, 35 in particular, he goes back to lecturing on Galatians. So we have Luther's work from early on, like, what was it, 1517 or 1518, so of his early work on Galatians, and then we have a whole bunch of stuff of his a little bit later work on Galatians. And so I want you to, we've got to just read just a little bit of that, because remember that Luther called the book of Galatians, or the letter, the epistle of Galatians, his what? Remember what he called it? His Katie von Bora. Now that was not a, now if you were Katie and you're in modern, you're comparing me to a letter in the Bible, you know, think of something a little more romantic. But for Martin Luther, I don't think you could, you know, both of them, on both directions. He loved Katie so much and thought so much of her that he said, this epistle of Galatians is my Catherine von Bora. So he loved Galatians. He thought it was so important. But now he has a new problem that he didn't have so much in 1570 when he first started working with Galatians. What are those? Okay. The first problem he's dealing with is the whole indulgence controversy, that we can do something to contribute to our justification. That good works somehow, you know, get into our justification. And he's saying, when he reads Galatians, he says that's ruled out. If you can be righteous by the works of the law, Paul says, Christ died in vain. If you, according to Luther's view of Galatians, if you let any of our works get into our making ourselves righteous, then Christ, you might as well have called the whole thing up. He died for no reason. That's what it says in Galatians. So Luther says, I mean, this book is so important, and so, but now, later, his German people, and what's starting to go on in Wittenberg here, is his lovely people are hearing the gospel. I'm free from the Pope? Oh, good. See ya, Martin. Thanks a lot. People aren't showing up for Mass. People aren't showing up for worship. They're not giving. They're not supporting pastors. You're having to get the secular government involved in taking care of pastors and all this stuff, and you're having to push and prod and this and that. And he has another problem, that is apathy, or a sense of, well, I get to do whatever I want now. Going on with some of the other reformers during this time is also a debate about the role of the law, and he and Melanchthon are a little bit different, some same but different, nuanced. These positions get kind of nuanced. But anyway, so all of this is going on now as he approaches Galatians. And so this is some words of Luther from the latter part of Galatians where it talks about freedom. So after Paul makes it very clear that we're justified by faith, that's how we enter the community of faith, that's how we enter being in God's community, but even more so, that's how we are made right before God, is by faith, not the law. After he makes that very clear in the first 4 chapters of Galatians, he then moves, okay, what do we do now? And he says very clearly, for freedom, Christ has set you free. Say that with me. For freedom, Christ has set you free. What is this freedom? Is it the freedom to say, see you, Luther, see you, church, I'm on my own. Sounds like America. Sounds like, well, even more so Europe. You know, I'm done with this. I'm good. I get to call my own shots. I get to do my own thing. And no authority gets to tell me what to do. Is that what it was? Well, let's see. So, Luther says, every word is emphatic in this passage. That is, it's an imperative. Stand fast, he says, in freedom. In what freedom? Not in the freedom for which the Roman emperor has set us free, but the freedom for which Christ has set us free. Alrighty, so what's he saying? When we talk about freedom, are we talking about what we typically talk about in America now? Right? We've had the Declaration of Independence, and each person, we believe that each person is free, right? Well, that's maybe true, but that's not exactly what Luther's saying. Freedom in the letter have this obey neither God nor the laws, but do what they please. This is freedom. This is the freedom which the rabble pursues today. I just want to do what I want to. Did you think that the me generation was the first one? No. I want to do what I want to do. I want to be free. Don't tell me what to do. So Luther's going to say, well, those are kinds of freedom. But is that what we're talking about here? Well, let's keep going. Therefore, the freedom by which we are free of the wrath of God forever is greater than heaven and earth and all creation. So he goes on to say, this is our freedom. The freedom I'm talking about is that we're free from the wrath of God, from the consequences of our sin. That is greater than heaven and earth and all creation. The words freedom from the wrath of God, from the law, sin, death, etc. are easy to say, but to feel the greatness of this freedom and to apply its results to oneself in a struggle, in the agony of conscience, and in practice, this is more difficult than anyone can say. Let's see if I've got something else here. I think I want to come back to that quote and hear some from you, but let's finish up there. Therefore, let us learn to place a high value on this freedom of ours. Not the emperor, not an angel from heaven, but Christ, the Son of God, through whom all things were created in heaven and earth, obtained it for us by his death to set us free, not from some physical and temporary slavery, but from the spiritual and eternal slavery of those most cruel and invincible tyrants. Is it the other political party? Is it a temporal leader? No. Law, sin, death, the devil. And to reconcile us to God the Father. Now that these enemies have been defeated, and now that we have been reconciled to God through the death of his Son, it is certain that we are righteous in the sight of God, and that all our actions are pleasing to him. And if there is any sin left in us, this is not imputed to us, but is forgiven for the sake of Christ. Awesome. Let's go back. What do you think Luther's saying here? I think he's saying, to have head knowledge that we're set free from the wrath of God is one thing, but it's hard when the rubber meets the road. When that conscience gets going, it says, you should have. You didn't. How come? And again, I know I've talked about this a lot as your pastor, but when I'm with people who are close to the end of their journey in this world and actually know it, because it's like right there, we all are, tomorrow could be the day. But when they're right there, they're thinking, I never made reconciled with that person. And, and then, I didn't give as much as I should have, and I haven't been a good enough Christian. Oh man, all the poor people. And the conscience starts to really kick our tail. Luther says, it's a struggle to bring this freedom into that moment when the rubber meets the road. That's why you need a good Christian friend to say, listen, you are forgiven, you're a child of God. Stop it. Tell that critic inside, thank you, but you've been dealt with by my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Great story, famous book by Bo Gertz, I think, called The Hammer of God. If you've never read this book, it's about frontier pastors. You should get this book, The Hammer of God. It's a great book. A young pastor is ministering to a gentleman who's on his deathbed, kind of like him. And this pastor's, trying to tell him, you're forgiven, about God's grace. And he's, he knows what to say, but this older guy says, you don't know what you're talking. You don't know how bad I've been, and you don't. And he just can't get him to give it up and just accept God's grace and forgiveness. Because this older guy, he's just in the battle, and he's not going to let this young pastor, get away with this anyway. But actually, the older guy is very sincere. He feels horrible. He knows what a sinner he is. And this pastor just can't get it done. So one of the older parish, women of the parish come to visit the man while the pastor's there. And I forget the older guy's name now. And she says to him, listen, you've got the Holy Spirit in you. Because if the Spirit wasn't in you, you wouldn't know what a jerk you've been your whole life. And if the Holy Spirit's in you, then you are forgiven. And she left and he got it. See, that's the struggle to do right what Luther's saying here. I mean, it's one thing to have this in your head, to know that you were set free from the sin, death, the devil, and your turned inward conscience. But man, when the rubber meets the road, you need a word from the Bible. You need the bread and wine. You need a pastor. You need a good friend who can tell you. You need words. I'll need it. I'll need somebody to tell me, because that old conscience just gets going, right? It says, the law. You know when you hear the law, right? Shoulda, woulda, coulda. When you hear, you ought, that's law speaking. When you hear those oughts. So, you see what he's getting at here? Powerful. It's going to have you, well, we can't break it into small groups here. So, let me stop before I make my final point and say, anybody have any comments? Anybody, yeah, can you come up here to Kevin, or questions or comments from what we've been working through here?
Just trying to reconcile the freedoms you're talking about relative to sovereign borders, because this was all happening in the context of a sovereign entity.
Yes.
And if you went and said the same thing in Iran, you'd be in trouble.
Yes, very true. So although Luther's going to distinguish that when Paul's talking about freedom and what we talk about is a more spiritual sense of freedom, then we do have to talk, though, about what does it mean to be free in a temporal sense, so that we can worship, so that we can, and so I don't want to belittle any of the freedoms that we have, which are fantastic and amazing, one of which is to assemble and worship, right? That's not always there in a lot of places. So when I was in Ethiopia, during the Marxist reign of that country, the Makani Jesus Lutheran Church, their head leader, was taken off into prison and killed. You couldn't just, worship. You could not do just, various things. So I think we always have to appreciate those freedoms. But at the same time, put them in perspective too. So anyway, I think helpful comment, Kevin. Other thoughts on what the conscience stuff? Please, Tom. Yeah.
I had the strange job of giving away medical supplies to former Soviet satellite countries right after they all broke away from the Soviet Union.
Wow.
We would take these medical supplies, huge shipments in, and by the time we gave them to them, the next day they'd be on the street in the black market and being misused and everything else. But my point is that there were governments put in place by the communist system that had no religious, spiritual orientation whatsoever. Right. And they functioned, but I always likened them to a wheezy car trying to get down the road.
Yeah.
And without that spiritual foundation, you're almost useless.
Right.
But could barely do the job.
Right. That really gets me thinking, that comment, Wasn't it part of our founders' belief that even democracy without a transcendent referent could never survive? I think that's true. Because you can't legislate inwardly motivated. So, and that's a concern item. Like, for instance, I know that you weren't planning that you'd make me go here on this, but what I think about is, going back to Kelly's comment, is remember when the one nation under God was being challenged because it wasn't always, the under God wasn't always in there? And I forget, and I remember Tim Wall, my dean of my seminary, it was going on right at that time, and I remember him asking a question, okay, so it wasn't in there originally, but what would it mean if we take it out? The Eisenhower term, probably with the communist stuff, yeah. But now, what would it mean if we took it out? Under what? I guess we're our own. We can make the call. I know that's not maybe what it used to say, but it's just a question. So, yeah, governments, you didn't say this for this reason, but one thing I get from it can be a lot worse. A lot worse. And maybe if we're not happy with it, it can be a lot worse. And it is. So but that's where I think the real change in our country, to me, has to be more people have to, and not just from a Christian perspective, whatever religion, that we have to have that transcendent referent to, keep us going in the right direction. So, yeah. Anyway, John, yeah.
It seems like the social movement's going the other way.
Yeah, there's certainly a movement that to blame Christianity for all the problems, But just keep that in perspective. But yet the statistics bear out. 78% in 2014 said they were Christian in this country. Are you surprised that it's that high? And this is a Pew Research. 78%. Now, if you listen to it, this country's high Christian, we're in a post-Christian time. I don't know, that may be true. But it went from 2004 to 2014 to 70%. So we lost 8% that just say they're Christian according to the Pew Research. Anyway, it's interesting. But it's maybe not as bad as what sometimes we get here when you compare to Europe, who has maybe 5% who would even say they're Christian. So we don't want to go there, I don't think. But anyway, it brings up a lot of interesting stuff. I wanted to, so we're at the end of our time, I wanted to hold up for you. Let me just see if I can get my laser going here. Oh, maybe not. Okay. I wanted to hold up for you, what's our ultimate problem? Is it the system of government? No. Our ultimate problem is law, sin, death, and the devil. That is our ultimate problem. Our problem is not a system of government, or a government may make our life miserable or good, or somewhere in between. But our ultimate problem, the focus of the faith, according to Luther and the Apostle Paul, is human sin. That gets manifested out in institutions and governments and whatnot. But we sometimes think, and this is where I'll tie back to Luther's earlier comments, we sometimes think, well, if I come up with the right plan and we get the right system, we can fix this. Well, it's human sin and turned inwardness that the gospel applies to, that's where we need to really focus. So anyway, I'm not saying you don't focus on some of the other stuff, but I think that's the ultimate challenge. Okay, hope you enjoyed this. We are going to move on from here, not next week because I'm gone. I'll be gone this week for Thanksgiving holiday and take a week of vacation. But the week following that, we will be back at a couple more weeks, and probably now, and this you're going to laugh, we're probably going to